Welcome to Empowered Life Hacks, where we share with you an explosion of tips to help you overcome your daily struggles. Pay attention for the audio and visual cues, and this will let you know when an actionable idea is right on its way.
Hey everybody, welcome to Empowered Life Hacks. Very fortunate for you all to join us today. Real quick intro to us. So our goal is to give you immediately actionable tips that you can apply tomorrow to your life, so you can make quick, visible changes without having to read long books or watch big old documentaries on how to change your life. And our goal is to influence the generations of tomorrow, or anybody of any age that is just willing to learn and grow. And today, as you see, we have my friend here, Chris, Chris Haskell. I've known him through LinkedIn, and we've been keeping in touch. And I told him of our initiative today. And I said, hey, is there a topic you feel like may affect the youth tomorrow that you can speak on? And one thing he mentioned is like, I feel like more people can just be going for it and using verbal communication. Am I right about that, Chris?
Yeah, it's so easy these days to just not have to talk to people. I think it's a skill that I'm nervous could be lost.
For sure, yeah. And after he told me that, I was intrigued. I'm like, whoa, why is this a topic to talk about? And basically, I wanted to research a bit more about why this topic's so prevalent. And there's so much communication that happens in person that is so important that you just don't get over social media. Like 70% of our communication is nonverbal. And when we do use words, things like our tonality and the way we carry ourselves make such a big difference to persuade people. And they found in 2012, most teens actually preferred face-to-face communication. And with movies like The Social Dilemma coming out teaching us that teens were targeted differently at that time, fast forward 6 years later, we found out most of them actually prefer social media. And biggest challenges with that I found through research is that a lot of people use social media because it does make them feel more confident. And they actually feel they're paying too much attention to their phone and are having difficulty breaking that mold. So this kind of leads into what Chris was noticing with people kind of just not going for it over probably the last 8 years to 10 years, and a lack of verbal communication amongst many people, but especially the youth. So Chris, maybe you could share a little bit about your journey and how this topic ends up relating to you a little bit.
Yeah, sure, Erica. Thanks. And I guess, I should say I'm going to be a little bit biased in this discussion because I talk for a living. So I work for a technology company, and I'm in the part of the sales process where I'm like building a pipeline for them, right? So I have to think all day long. I have to go find people that don't know about us and go convince them that it's worth talking to us and kind of getting to know us. I've been very deliberate over I completely fell into this career. It wasn't my choice. But I built it off of the ability to sort of make introductions. Like that first impressions thing is something that I've always had and something that I've always wanted to, or it's kind of, I viewed as important. So whether that's socially or in business, I just took those same skill set and sort of am getting paid to try to make good first impressions, which has helped me not overthink this job and just feel like, hey, this person who I'm about to call, I don't know him yet, but they're a future friend. I just want to give some background into my bias coming into this discussion. I see in the majority of these tech companies that get started across whatever the technology is, they're started by engineers. They're started by folks that are brilliant designers and tinkerers and futurists and like whatever you want to call. There's a lot of buzzwords around like what these folks are, but they're not salespeople, and they're not necessarily like social, and they're not necessarily like it's more IQ versus EQ, right? That emotional intelligence, and so I just view this like this idea that whether it's in a career or just personally, I think it really overlaps. This idea that if you can make some small steps and gain confidence in your ability to just walk up to somebody and either ask them on a date or ask them into a sales meeting, or all these different applications of this, it's a little bit of a skill that I'm nervous is going to get lost when things like email automation are getting better and social media advertising is getting better. And, people think more now in terms of like what's coming to me and how do I respond to the stuff that's coming in towards me. But there's another, for me, there's a more exciting principle here around how can I go find something that is not coming to me.
And that's brilliant. It's kind of cool how life works for some people differently, right? In terms of just like being inclined to be a certain way, and then finding that passion and that purpose. Um, And what's cool is you had a mindset, and now I think something like mindset in terms like kindness is being overplayed in today's world, but mindset is so important. And you mentioned that mindset about thinking people are already your friend already. Now, can you dig deeper into that and like how that may have helped you, or when you found that kind of mindset and
Yeah.
how it's changed the way you interact?
So when I was in high school, I was in something called the Help and Information Club, right? It's called the High Club. And the whole point of it was just to help people that were new to the school um, feel comfortable at the school. Because I lived internationally and there's a lot of people kind of moving in and out. And so there was a need to kind of help this transition of kids coming in to this new school. And, you know, I joined after I'd been at the school for 3 months. So like I have a little bit of a warped mentality that like I have something to say and I'm gonna help even though I was new myself. But what it's one of these things. I had no grand plan, grand vision for this club. I just thought it would be kind of fun to meet new people and help. But one of the things I saw from this was that when folks are moving to a new school, and then you can translate this into like moving to a new city or getting into a new job. There is that first month or two is pretty important in terms of, are you going to do a little bit of work yourself to do some outreach to meet people, kind of, there's a window when you're new somewhere where you can say like, hey, I'm new, can we talk?
Hmm.
And people will almost always say yes. Like I've almost never had somebody say, I don't have time for you, new person. Like that's a weird request. Like they'll almost always say yes. Um, but as time goes on, if you're 6 months in a new school or in a new job or a new city, you can't use that anymore. So there's this really small window where you can sort of like, if you're starting something and you can just say like, hey, like, can we just talk? And I'm new, and you don't even have to have a grand plan going in. You just sort of meet people, and there's something that happens in these interactions, whether they're extremely focused or a bit more natural, where themes start to develop. So, at a new school, you start to get a lay of the land, start to feel more comfortable, or in a new city, you start to see like maybe the neighborhood you want to live in, or like the kind of activities you want to get involved with, right? Or then at work, you start to see like kind of your role play out, not as it's written on the paper, but like, how does a company actually work? And like, what are those things that people aren't saying? And like, how do where do you kind of fit in this? What skills do they need from you? And I just think that there's a huge difference between doing that and then not doing that and trying to play catch up and kind of feeling like you're coming from behind, uh, uh, and having to rely on your own wit and charm. Because I don't like most people, that's not a comfortable spot to be in.
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost seems when if I remember people in my life as time wore on, those aren't necessarily people that are bullied, but in your mind you categorize them as people that don't engage, right? And it's if they do engage, it's okay, but it's difficult for them to weave into the group once they've already been sanctified as a specific character type. Now, the good news is what you're saying is you can overcome that by having the mindset of, do you know what? Like, we're friends. Like we're humans. You'll engage with me if I engage with you. It'll just be a bit harder potentially.
Oh, sorry. That was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In terms of mindset, yeah. So, um, there's a lot of talk about, I think in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of research and TED Talks and discussion about like how to make it as an introvert.
Hmm.
And I want to be like, kind of the reason I was giving some of that background and some of the reason I was kind of giving like setting the context for who I am is like, I'm like full extrovert, right? Like I'm like, I know that this sort of social stuff comes easy for me. So I am very aware that like, that's not true for everybody, but I think where it can be universal is kind of in like, so the way I think about it is like kind of knowing your limits and celebrating small victories, right? So if you are naturally a person who's chatty all the time, like you're probably not of this podcast or like of this video series, right? Like there is you just kind of do this stuff naturally, right? It's like the athlete that doesn't know how to coach. Like you just like they're just good at it. I don't know. They just like they can just play the sport, right? But for everybody else, I think there's this kind of crippling anxiety, or can become crippling, around looking at people that are just more extroverted naturally, and being like, is that the standard for kind of like putting myself out there and like and feeling that I belong at the table and feeling that they're going to be friends already, because that's super scary, right? Like if you don't have that naturally. And so the way that I've worked with people, just maybe even not like a session, but just like friends or like people like colleagues, like the way that we kind of work together, if they are a little bit more introverted naturally, is to start to actually like map, kind of think about and actually kind of write down and start to understand where your limits are. So like, if you're a computer engineer, like a software engineer, you're most likely not going to be in sales, right? So your limit doesn't have to be, I'm going to make a cold call. That's kind of like a silly, like, but maybe it's more social. Maybe it's like, hey, I really want to go, like in Austin. I live in Austin, Texas, and there's this thing called the Austin Sports and Social Club where it's just like you can play like dodgeball and kickball and like soft, whatever. Just a chance to meet people and kind of play sports, right? So maybe like the first step is signing up for a team. Like there's no limits to do that, right? And like just showing up to that first practice and like first kind of meeting is enough. You don't have to go to the social afterwards. Like you were there, like you can go home and like that's a check mark. That's a success, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then maybe like the fourth time you go, you can join for the drinks afterward. But like maybe you need some time to kind of warm up and see who you like, and like that's totally fine. Like it's as long as you kind of have a mindset of like celebrating these little steps and these little successes, and having somebody, whether it's family or friends, that you're like chatting to about this, right? And being like, hey, I did it. I showed up at the sports club. Like like I did it. Like I went and I came home and like I'm gonna go to bed. I'm exhausted. That was enough social for me for like a week, right? It's fine. Like it's totally fine. Like this is like anything else. I think it's a muscle, and so you can't just expect to like dive in because it's going to be overwhelming. But like if you build up these little steps and build up these successes, before you look 6 months back, and you're like, oh man, I'm like leading a session now. I'm like the one paying for drinks now, and it's like I would have never imagined this 6 months ago. But you just like you don't see these little individual steps, but they build up something great.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing you were just saying, because it's like these little wins take a lot of pressure off you thinking you have to make these huge interactions that you see other people make. For you and I are extroverted clearly, and we just go for things, right? I met you, it was just like boom, let's talk,
Yeah,
let's chat, let's
right,
collaborate.
right.
But for other people, it's not that easy. And I think what you just shared with people is that whether we acknowledge it or not, the fear of being rejected, the fear of what people think is very hard on us. And we need evidence visually to show us that it's not that hard out there. So by doing these little things, you're giving your mind evidence to be less fearful as you get these little connections that are positively affirming your value, whether it
Yeah,
be to a team or at work. I mean, now with COVID, people are locked in. Obviously, it's harder to play team sports. However, there's online things you can do, right? Like meets and things like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So yeah.
Yeah, you said there's like this is such a minor point, but I just want to like, you said kind of put yourself out there. It's actually easy. And like, one thing I've found is just by knowing a lot of introverts is like, there's a lot of people where it's never easy, right? And that's totally fine. Like, I don't know if the goal of this is necessarily to be easy, but that kind of ties into something else that I was thinking about as I was like, kind of thinking about where I wanted to like focus on with this. Or, I think that there's something in here that I just wanted to stress. Like, it's very important to have goals and boundaries around this, right? So, like for some people that this is just like kind of putting yourself out there or taking these big social risks or engaging in real life conversation is not natural. um, it's fine. It doesn't have to be. And if you have a goal in mind, like I need to get a job or I need to like get involved in some activities in my local community or find some online communities that are like supportive of my hobby, right? Like when you reach that goal, what's going to happen is you're actually stretching and pushing yourself without knowing it, but it's taking the pressure off of having to do it. um, and I hope that makes sense because it's a very powerful difference. Like um, you're going to build up these skills regardless of how much you're beating yourself up, right? But if all the attention and focus is on like beating yourself up because you don't have them, it's going to be harder to get them, right? So if you kind of like if you can kind of work on like celebrating small wins and just being like, look, when I get this job, like, or when I make two friends or like whatever it is, I'm done. The sneaky part is subconsciously you're building this skill anyways. Your body's like, you're gonna get sort of like, I don't know, I hate to use the word better, but you're gonna get like more comfortable with this and like you're gonna develop the skill. The difference is you're not gonna hate the process. and that sometimes that can make a world of difference.
Yeah, it's like you don't realize yourself, for example, grow in height. Like you don't wake up in the morning and be like, "Oh, I'm 5'6" today." When you were a kid, right? You're just taller, and then you end up measuring in yourself, and you're like, "Oh, wow, I grew a bit," or you notice you're a bit taller than your friends.
Yeah.
So, like everything, it's a process. Um, and it kind of seems again like you gave a remedy for overcoming a lot of fears by just doing things very slowly and dipping your toes in the water and just letting your body adjust to that. Um, and just going back to the social media portion of everything, we mentioned that, obviously COVID's here and we can interact with each other in a different way, not in person. In a good way, if you're a bit more timid, you can still use, uh, like, for example, Zoom or other things to meet with people, which is a bit less intimidating,
Mhm.
which is great. But another problem with this is we're increasingly on our computers. It increasingly draws us in. And documentaries like The Social Dilemma, if you saw, about in 2012, they created the algorithms which target people more intelligently. There's
Mhm.
things going on all over the world that are trying to suck your attention. How can we use these platforms in our favor? Like, if we are going to be on them even more than ever, how can we leverage things like social media, phone, and email to maybe start an endeavor we would like, or meet different people, or do things differently?
Yeah. So yeah, like I think, so I like your question, Eric, and I think, just I don't want to make this political, but I think it's, in that movie Social Dilemma, like they talk about politically, like there's one of the things that's happening is that as people are liking stories, they're getting more of those kinds of stories, right? So you wind up just sort of your whole world becomes like slanted towards the things that you like, and so it's kind of this self-fulfilling like cycle, where your whole world is just it is like a particular viewpoint or a particular set of news stories, and like I think that's true for social stuff as well. Like I'm on Reddit and I'm pretty engaged in movie communities, right? So this is a silly example, but like it's possible for me to think that like everybody in the world likes French New Wave cinema, right? Because I'm in like 5 different movie communities or film communities, right? So like I know that's not true, but like this. Uh, but it's possible for me to believe that because everybody that I talk to on Reddit is like they know about Truffaut and they know about Godard. Like these are words that are like very common to them. So uh, kind of tying this all in together though, for me it really goes back to goals. Like if you're gonna stay on Reddit or like Instagram or like I don't know whatever like Facebook maybe, even though I think that's kind of like dying out a little bit, but like whatever it is, like if you're going to stay on these platforms and try to form like new communities or do like new hobbies or like kind of push yourself on these platforms, it still for me kind of ties into goals, um,
Makes sense.
because like I think just our human nature, like the example that I think of is my weight has been up or down my whole life, right? So finally what I decided on when I reached kind of my max weight, this was maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, was like, I'm not going to try these big 30-pound diets anymore, like these 40-pound diets anymore, right? I'm going to celebrate like crazy if I lose 10 pounds this year. And I was pretty big, so that was like pretty easy to do. But like I did it. And like at the end of the year, I was like, sweet, I lost 10 pounds. Now, like, what's one change I need to make in my life next year to lose another 10 pounds, right? And like that was it. Like that was it, and I was really happy with that because I was 10 pounds lighter than I was like the year before, right? And i I think like having that kind of like these small steps, these celebrating the small wins, like having a plan and having a goal in mind, it makes all this a lot easier to do, because if the goal is just to like go find a new community to engage with online, it's going to be overwhelming, right? Because there's like so many communities, and there's even people that might say like, I don't know what my hobbies are. I need to. How do you get a hobby? How do you like build a hobby, right? So it really just depends kind of where you are like on this spectrum, I guess, of kind of the social like spectrum, and that's where I think it comes in handy to have 1 or 2 people that know you well, to where you can kind of talk through this and be like, hey, like 2021 or 2022, whatever, like here's kind of a general goal I want to have. Like I want to be a little bit more brave socially. Um, this one guy, like on a video series, said it's important. I don't know. I want to try it, um, and and have like and develop these goals with people that know you well, so that they can kind of help you rein it in a little bit and be like, hey, I love that you want to like go climb Mount Everest before you have any mountain gear, but like, what if we start at like a local hill just to make sure you can climb like a mile before, you know, you go to Everest?
Yeah, that ties in really well to just having those measurable steps and developing that kind of plan so you know your why. And I think we didn't really touch on why a lot, but directly, but a lot of this is driven by your why. Figure out a why and have really humble goals and have somebody accountable to help you build and accomplish those things. Along with the little journal, I guess would be very handy with this as well, I imagine.
Yeah, and like, so if you go spend like an hour on Facebook, you're gonna find people that are like, "You can do anything, push it." Like, I get it. Like, there's some people that that's motivating for them, right? Like, find if that's motivating to you, like find those people and go do it and be like the best you. Like, that's fine. But that was never me. Like, I kind of found that cheesy and like that was not motivating to me. So I kind of had to find my own way. Like, I don't know. Yeah, and so like just even in the way that you get motivated, like um, you know, just find like-minded people and like and celebrate these the things that you're doing that are different and pushing yourself, because it's all worthy of celebration. Like self-improvement. I think the why, like I, you know, for me, like people that really spend a lot of their lives, like psychologists, philosophers, like trying to dig into like the why of life. For me, it's like, you know, it's this like it's the difference between like I want to be somebody who's always growing, right? Rather than kind of becoming like calcified and rigid and just stuck. And so I don't know that that's where everybody's at, but like it's like I find that life is more invigorating if you're uncomfortable some of the time, right? Like if you're constantly comfortable, life is actually not that fulfilling, I think. And I think that it's in that discomfort where you get better stories, and and you get that confidence. It just kind of builds naturally because it's like you've been there before. You've been in an uncomfortable situation before, and you survived. So you know what? Like you can probably survive the next one, right? And it's just building that skill set. And if you build your whole life up to where you're comfortable all the time, then leave that comfort zone becomes more and more padded and more like safe, and it becomes really hard to leave. So that's the why for me.
And that is a great why. I mean, you covered a lot today. Having your goals set out, trying little things, having little wins too along the way, having an accountability buddy, agenda, and also using social media and like jujitsuing it, like using that motion against itself and making it productive. So I think we have a lot of good resources and tools to help the people listening today, the youth of tomorrow, or the adult mind trying to grow. Chris, I just want to thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking about this idea and following through, and looking forward to talking to you again. And everybody for joining. Hopefully, this was valuable to you.
Hey, Eric, thanks. Thanks for putting up with my Wi-Fi issues, and and good luck, everybody.
Thanks so much for learning how to just go for it, but slowly and gradually, right? No need to just try and climb Everest. Why not just climb the baby hill and just see where we're at and feel good about ourselves and get that check mark, that affirmation that we are progressing and we can do this. Now, if you're like me, even though I'm an extrovert, I still sometimes feel like I don't fit in. Despite my expertise, despite my knowledge, despite my competence and all that, I still doubt myself. And I thought, you know, sometimes we will be going for it, but we will have that fear of rejection, that fear of what people think, and that feeling of that we're not necessarily jiving or fitting in. So I have Rada coming on the show soon to talk about basically when you're not fitting in, how to use that energy to find yourself and basically go into your own flow, your own rhythm, and your own vibe, and connect with people and become more confident in just who you are as a person. If you're an introvert, great. If you like drawing and not talking to people, cool. But let's explore that more. And Rada's going to give us some actionable tips to do that, and I'm really excited to have her on. So can't wait to check you guys out in 2 weeks. Have a good one. Ciao.